My name is Marcus, and the day I told my family I'd be rich someday, they laughed so hard my Uncle Derek nearly choked on his beer. My cousin Vanessa recorded it on her phone and posted it with crying laughing emojis. My own mother patted my cheek like I was 7 years old and said, "That's sweet, honey. Maybe start with paying your own rent first." But 10 years later, when I pulled up to my father's 70th birthday party in that midnight blue Bentley Continental GT with the bow on top, nobody was laughing. In fact, the silence was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. What they didn't know was that the car wasn't the real gift. The truth I was about to reveal would change everything they thought they knew about me, about our family, and about who really kept their promises. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The steering wheel felt cool under my palms as I sat in the driveway of my parents' house in suburban Milwaukee, engine purring like a satisfied cat. The house looked exactly the same as it did when I left 8 years ago with 2 suitcases and a bus ticket to Seattle. Same beige siding, same crooked mailbox that Dad kept saying he'd fix, same basketball hoop with no net hanging over the garage. The only difference was the crowd of people spilling out onto the lawn, balloons tied to the porch railing spelling out 70 in shimmering gold. I'd driven 17 hours straight from Seattle to be here, stopping only for gas and coffee. My business partner Ryan had offered to fly me in on the company jet, but I'd declined. I needed the time alone, needed to feel every mile between who I used to be and who I'd become. The Bentley had been delivered to a secure lot just outside Chicago, where I'd picked it up that morning. The dealer had detailed it twice, making sure every inch was perfect. The bow, custom made in my father's favorite color navy blue, sat perfectly centered on the hood. I checked my watch. 3:15 in the afternoon. The party had started at 2, which meant I was fashionably late, exactly as planned. Through the windshield, I could see people mingling in clusters, paper plates in hand, probably eating Mom's famous potato salad and Dad's overcooked burgers. I recognized most of them even from this distance. Uncle Derek with his perpetual beer belly, Aunt Linda in something floral and too tight, my older brother Cameron towering over everyone at 6'4", his wife Jessica hanging on his arm like an expensive accessory. And then there was Vanessa, my cousin, 28 years old and still living off her parents' money while posting inspirational quotes about hustle and grind on social media. She was holding court near the drink table, probably telling everyone about her latest business venture that would inevitably fail within 6 months like all the others. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. Mom had called me 2 weeks ago, voice tight with that particular tone she used when she was trying not to sound disappointed in me. "Your father's turning 70, Marcus. I know you're busy with whatever it is you're doing out there in Seattle, but it would mean the world to him if you came home. He asks about you, you know. Wonders how you're doing." I'd told her I'd try to make it, which in our family was code for probably not going to happen. She'd sighed, said she understood, told me to take care of myself, and hung up before I could hear the crack in her voice. That sound had haunted me for 2 weeks straight. My father had never been good with words, never been the type to say I love you or I'm proud of you. His language was different, quieter. It was in the way he'd slip $20 into my coat pocket when I was struggling in college, or how he'd stay up late helping me study for exams even though he had to be at the factory at 5 in the morning. He'd worked at Mueller Manufacturing for 42 years, starting on the factory floor and working his way up to shift supervisor. His hands were permanently stained with machine oil, his back bent from decades of labor, his dreams filed away in the same drawer as his high school yearbook. He used to talk about owning a Bentley when I was a kid, back when we'd watch old movies together on Saturday nights. He'd point at the screen whenever one appeared and say, "Now that's a car, Marcus. That's what a man drives when he's made something of himself." I'd asked him once why he never bought one, and he'd laughed, the sound hollow. "Cars like that aren't for guys like me, son. They're for people who take risks, who bet big." I played it safe, kept my head down, provided for my family. That's enough. But I'd heard the regret in his voice, seen the way his eyes lingered on luxury cars and parking lots, the way he'd pause when Bentley commercials came on during football games. That car represented everything he'd wanted to be but convinced himself he couldn't. And I'd promised myself, sitting there at 12 years old in our cramped living room, that one day I'd buy him that car. One day I'd show him that dreams didn't have to die just because you chose responsibility over risk. Of course, when I'd announced that promise at 23, fresh out of college with a useless communications degree and $40,000 in student debt, working as a barista at a chain coffee shop, my family had treated it like a joke. We'd been at Cameron's house for Thanksgiving dinner, the table loaded with food none of us could really afford but made anyway because that's what you did. I'd had a few beers, feeling bold, feeling like maybe the tech startup idea my friend Josh and I had been working on might actually go somewhere. "I'm going to be rich one day," I'd said, voice carrying over the conversation. The table had gone quiet. Then Derek had snorted. "Rich? You? Doing what, kid? Making lattes?" Everyone had laughed. Even Dad had smiled, though his didn't quite reach his eyes. Cameron had clapped me on the shoulder, condescending as always. "That's the spirit, little brother. Dream big. Just make sure you've got a backup plan for when reality hits." Vanessa had been the worst, pulling out her phone and recording me as I doubled down, cheeks burning. "I'm serious. I'm going to make something of myself, and when I do, the first thing I'm buying is a Bentley for Dad. Midnight blue, just like the one in that old movie we used to watch." The video had made the rounds at every family gathering for the next 2 years. Remember when Marcus said he'd buy Dad a Bentley, they'd say, dissolving into laughter. It became a running joke, a punchline, a reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. Cameron was the successful one, the engineer with the 6-figure salary and the house in the suburbs. I was the dreamer, the screw-up, the one who'd probably end up back in my childhood bedroom by 30. What they didn't know was that their mockery had become my fuel. Every laugh, every dismissive comment, every time someone asked when I was going to get a real job had added another log to the fire burning in my chest. Josh and I had worked 16-hour days on our app, living off ramen and black coffee, sleeping on his apartment floor because I couldn't afford my own place anymore. We'd pitched to 47 investors before someone finally said yes. We'd nearly gone bankrupt twice. I'd maxed out every credit card I had, borrowed money from friends I wasn't sure I could pay back, and spent countless nights staring at my laptop screen wondering if I was delusional. But then something had shifted. Our app, a platform connecting freelance workers with short-term gigs before the gig economy became mainstream, had caught on. Slowly at first, then explosively. Within 2 years, we had 3 million users. Within 4, we'd been acquired by a major tech company for an amount that still didn't feel real when I saw it in my bank account. After taxes, lawyer fees, and paying back everyone I owed, I'd walked away with enough money to never work again if I didn't want to. But I had wanted to. I'd taken my share and started investing, consulting, building new things. Money made money when you knew what you were doing, and I'd spent years learning from people who'd done it before. Now, at 33, I owned equity in 12 different companies, had a penthouse in downtown Seattle, and could buy pretty much anything I wanted. Except I hadn't wanted much. I'd bought a decent car, nothing flashy. I'd furnished my apartment comfortably but not ostentatiously. I'd donated more than I'd spent, setting up scholarship funds for kids from backgrounds like mine, investing in community programs in neighborhoods that looked like the one I grew up in. The money had never been the point. The point had been proving something, not to them, but to that 12-year-old kid who'd made a promise to his father. I'd kept in touch with my parents over the years, calling every few weeks, visiting once or twice when I could slip in and out without fanfare. I'd helped them quietly, paying off their mortgage through a bank error they never questioned too hard, making sure Dad's medical bills from his knee surgery disappeared, sending Mom on the vacation to Hawaii she'd always talked about as an anonymous gift. They suspected, I think, but I never confirmed. The rest of the family had no idea. As far as they knew, I was doing okay in Seattle, working some vague tech job, still trying to make something of myself. Let them think that. Let them hold on to their assumptions and their superiority and their little jokes. Because today, on my father's 70th birthday, I was going to hand him the keys to his dream and watch their faces when they realized that the family joke had become the family success story. I opened the car door and stepped out, my Italian leather shoes hitting the pavement with a satisfying sound. I dressed carefully this morning, choosing a casual but expensive outfit. Dark jeans, a perfectly fitted navy button-down, a watch that cost more than Cameron's car but looked understated enough that only people who knew watches would recognize it. I wanted to look successful but not showy, confident but not arrogant. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The conversation on the lawn had started to die down as people noticed the car. I heard the whispers starting, saw heads turning, phone cameras coming out. The Bentley gleamed in the afternoon sun, every curve and line screaming elegance and power and money. The bow fluttered slightly in the breeze, navy blue silk catching the light. I walked around to the passenger side and pulled out the gift bag I'd prepared. Inside was a card I'd written on the 17-hour drive, pulling over at a rest stop in Montana to find the words. The message was simple: Dad, you taught me that real wealth isn't about what you own but about keeping your promises. This is me keeping mine. Happy 70th birthday. I love you. Marcus. As I walked up the driveway, the crowd parted like water. I could feel their eyes on me, could hear the confused murmurs. Uncle Derek was the first to speak, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. Marcus? Is that you? I smiled, the expression feeling strange on my face after the long drive. Hey, Uncle Derek. Good to see you. He stared at the car, then at me, then back at the car. That's not yours. Actually, it's not mine, I agreed, walking past him toward where my father stood frozen by the grill, spatula in hand, mouth slightly open. It's Dad's. The spatula clattered onto the ground. Mom appeared beside him, her hand going to her mouth, eyes already filling with tears. She'd always cried at everything, happy or sad, but these tears were different. These were the kind that came from watching something impossible become real. Dad's voice, when he finally found it, was barely a whisper. Son, what did you do? I stopped in front of him, this man who'd given up his dreams so I could chase mine, whose calloused hands had worked themselves raw to make sure I had opportunities he never did, whose quiet strength had been the foundation I'd built everything on. I kept my promise, I said simply. Happy birthday, Dad. I held out the keys, the Bentley key fob heavy and substantial in my palm. He didn't take them immediately. His eyes, the same dark brown as mine, searched my face like he was looking for the punchline, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Around us, the party had gone completely silent. Even the music someone had been playing from a portable speaker had stopped. Marcus, Mom breathed, you can't afford that. Actually, Mom, I can. I kept my eyes on Dad, watching the emotions play across his weathered face. Confusion, disbelief, hope, fear. I can afford this and a lot more. But this one's special. This one's been waiting 10 years. Cameron's voice cut through from somewhere behind me, sharp with disbelief. This is a joke, right? This is some kind of rental for the day, make Dad feel special, take some photos? I didn't turn around. It's not a rental, Cam. It's fully paid for, titles in Dad's name, insurance is covered for the year. It's his. Vanessa's laugh was shrill, nervous. Come on, Marcus. Bentleys cost like, what, $200,000? You're a barista who plays with apps. There's no way you have that kind of money. Now I did turn, meeting her eyes across the lawn. She was still holding her phone, probably recording this too, probably already planning what caption would get her the most engagement. I haven't been a barista in 8 years, Vanessa. And I don't play with apps. I build companies. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. I turned back to my father, gently taking his hand and placing the keys in his palm, closing his fingers around them. You told me once that cars like this aren't for guys like you, I said quietly, though I knew everyone was straining to hear. You were wrong, Dad. They're exactly for guys like you. Guys who work hard, who sacrifice, who put their families first. Guys who teach their sons that keeping your word matters more than anything else. His hand was shaking, the keys jingling softly. A single tear rolled down his cheek, disappearing into the gray stubble he'd probably forgotten to shave that morning. Marcus, I don't understand. How did you, when did you? It's a long story, I said, my own voice getting thick. And I'll tell you all of it. But right now, why don't you go check out your new car? I think there's a tank full of premium gas and an open road with your name on it. For a moment, I thought he might refuse, might hand the keys back and say it was too much, he couldn't accept it. That would be just like him, always putting others first, always playing small. But then something shifted in his expression, something I'd never seen before. His shoulders straightened, his grip tightened on the keys, and a smile broke across his face like sunrise. You really bought me a Bentley, he said, wonder in his voice. I really bought you a Bentley, I confirmed. He pulled me into a hug then, so tight I could barely breathe, could smell the familiar scent of Old Spice and charcoal smoke in home. His voice was muffled against my shoulder. I'm so proud of you, son. So damn proud. Those words, the ones I'd waited my whole life to hear said exactly like that, broke something loose in my chest. I hugged him back just as hard, not caring that the whole family was watching, not caring that I was 33 years old and crying in my father's arms like I was 5. Some moments were bigger than pride, bigger than image. When we finally pulled apart, Mom was there, immediately wrapping me in her own embrace, her tears soaking into my shirt. My baby, she kept saying, my baby boy. The crowd had started to move closer, tentative, curious. I could see the questions forming on their faces, the calculations happening behind their eyes as they tried to reconcile the Marcus they thought they knew with the Marcus standing in front of them. But before anyone could start interrogating me, Dad cleared his throat. Well, he said, voice rough but carrying, I think it's about time I took my new car for a spin. Marcus, you riding shotgun? I grinned. Wouldn't miss it for the world. We walked to the Bentley together, and I showed him how to unlock it, how the door handles presented themselves at a touch, how the interior lights came on in a soft cascade. He slid into the driver's seat with reverent care, his hands hovering over the steering wheel like he was afraid to touch it. I climbed into the passenger side, sinking into leather so soft it felt like butter. This is really mine, he asked again, running his fingers over the wood trim, the chrome details, the perfect stitching. Every inch of it, I assured him. I even had them customize the floor mats with your initials. He looked down and laughed, a sound of pure joy that I'd rarely heard from him. Robert J. Harrison. Well, I'll be damned. The engine started with a refined rumble, and I watched my father's face light up like a kid's on Christmas morning. Through the windshield, I could see the family standing in a cluster on the lawn, watching us, and for just a moment, I caught Cameron's expression. It wasn't the superiority I'd expected. It was something else. Something that looked almost like respect. Dad pulled out of the driveway slowly, carefully, like he was driving something precious. And he was. Not just the car, but the dream, the promise, the proof that sometimes the long shots pay off and the underdogs win and the jokes become legends. We drove through the neighborhood in silence for a few minutes, just absorbing the moment. The car handled like a dream, responding to every touch with precision and power. Dad kept glancing over at me, then back at the road, like he couldn't quite believe I was real. Finally, at a stop sign 3 blocks from the house, he spoke. Tell me everything, Marcus. Tell me how a kid who left here with nothing came back with this. So I did. I told him about the app, about the sleepless nights and the failed pitches and the moment we'd finally gotten our first real investor. I told him about the acquisition, about how I'd nearly said no because it felt like giving up, until Josh had reminded me that sometimes winning means knowing when to cash out. I told him about the investments, the consulting work, the way money had stopped being about survival and started being about impact. I wanted to tell you sooner, I admitted. Wanted to share it with you and Mom as it was happening. But I needed to do it on my own first. Needed to prove, not just to them but to myself, that I could. He nodded slowly, understanding in a way I'd known he would. And the money you've been sending? The mortgage payoff, the medical bills? All me, I confirmed. I couldn't buy you a Bentley until today, but I could make sure you weren't struggling. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else, Dad. It was time someone took care of you. His eyes were wet again, but he was smiling. Your mother knew, he said. She didn't say anything, but I could tell. Mothers always know. We drove for another 20 minutes, looping through streets I'd grown up on, past the park where I'd learned to ride a bike, the school where I'd been an average student in every way, the library where I'd discovered computers and coding and the idea that maybe there was a world beyond Milwaukee waiting for me. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, which I guess was natural. I'd grown, and this place had stayed the same. We should probably head back, Dad said eventually, reluctance in his voice. Your mother will worry, and I suppose the rest of them are waiting to hear the story too. Yeah, I agreed, though I wasn't looking forward to the interrogation that was coming. Plus, your burgers are probably burnt by now. He laughed. Probably right. Though I'm thinking maybe tonight we order from that fancy steakhouse downtown. My treat. Dad, I think today I can handle dinner. No, he said firmly, pulling back onto their street. You bought me a Bentley. The least I can do is buy you a steak. The party was still in full swing when we returned, though the atmosphere had shifted. People weren't just milling around anymore. They were waiting, gathered in expectant clusters, conversations pausing as we pulled back into the driveway. Dad parked the Bentley right in front of the house, center stage, impossible to ignore. As we got out, Uncle Derek was the first to approach, beer in hand as always, but his expression had changed. The mockery was gone, replaced by something like genuine curiosity. Okay, Marcus, he said. You've got to tell us what the hell happened to you. Last we heard, you were barely scraping by in Seattle. That's what I let you hear, I corrected gently. There's a difference. Cameron appeared at my elbow, and up close I could see the strain in his smile. So you're rich now? Like, really rich? I'm comfortable, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I've done well for myself. Well enough to drop $200,000 on a car? Vanessa chimed in, her phone still out, still recording. Of course she was. This was prime content for her. What do you do, Marcus? Are you like a tech bro now? Did you invent an app or something? Or something, I agreed. Look, I didn't come here to make a big announcement about my finances. I came to give my father a gift and spend time with family. The car speaks for itself. But Aunt Linda, never one to let a moment pass without commentary, pushed forward. It's just surprising, honey. You always seemed so average. No offense. None taken, I said, though it stung more than I wanted to admit. Average. That word had followed me my entire childhood, branded on every report card, every family comparison, every conversation about potential. Marcus is average. Marcus is fine. Marcus is doing okay. Mom, sensing the tension, clapped her hands together. All right, everyone, let's not interrogate my son at his father's birthday party. There's still cake to cut and food to eat. Marcus, honey, are you hungry? You must be starving after that drive. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at it, saw Ryan's name on the screen with a text, board meeting moved to tomorrow morning. Need you on the call at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Also, congratulations on the dad thing. He's going to remember this forever. Ryan had been my partner through everything, the person who'd believed in our idea when no one else would, who'd worked just as hard and sacrificed just as much. He knew what today meant to me, had helped me plan it actually, making sure the Bentley was delivered on time, that every detail was perfect. His text was a reminder that this moment, as significant as it was just one part of a life that had become bigger and busier than I'd ever imagined. I pocketed the phone and turned back to my mother. I'm starving, actually. Let's eat. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of conversations and carefully neutral responses to increasingly direct questions about my finances. Cameron asked about investment strategies. Derek wanted to know if I was hiring. Vanessa tried 3 times to get me to be more specific about my net worth for her financial planning podcast, which I was 90% sure didn't actually exist. But through it all, I kept catching glimpses of my father, standing by his new car, running his hands over the hood like he couldn't quite believe it was real. People kept approaching him too, wanting to sit in the driver's seat, take photos, hear the engine rev. And every single time, his chest puffed out just a little more, his smile got a little wider, his voice carried a little prouder when he said, "My son Marcus bought it for me." That was what I'd come for. Not their questions, not their sudden interest in my life, not even the validation I'd once craved. Just that look on his face, that note in his voice, that unguarded pride that said everything we'd never been good at saying out loud. As evening approached and the party started winding down, Dad found me sitting on the back porch, nursing a beer and watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. He lowered himself into the chair beside me with a grunt, his bad knee making the movement awkward. "Hell of a day," he said simply. "Yeah," I agreed. "Hell of a day." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sound of distant laughter and conversation drifting from inside the house. Finally, Dad spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "You know what I've been thinking about?" "What's that?" "That Thanksgiving, 10 years ago, when you made that promise." Everyone laughed. I laughed too, though I wish I hadn't. He paused, took a long pull from his beer. "But you didn't laugh. You just looked at me, and I saw something in your eyes that scared me a little. You meant it. You really, honestly meant it." "I did," I confirmed quietly. "I should have believed in you then," he said. "Should have told everyone to shut up, that if my son said he was going to do something, then by God he'd do it. But I didn't. I let them laugh, let them make their jokes. That's been eating at me, Marcus. These last few years, every time you called, every time you visited, I wanted to ask how you were really doing, wanted to be there for whatever you were building. But I was afraid you'd think I was just like them, just waiting to see you fail." I turned to look at him, saw the regret written across his weathered features. "Dad, you did believe in me. You always did. It was quiet, sure, but it was there. Every time you slipped me money when I was struggling, every time you asked how the business was going without pushing for details, every time you told Mom to leave me alone and let me figure it out. That was you believing in me." "Yeah, but you should have done exactly what you did," I interrupted firmly. "You taught me to keep my head down and work hard. You showed me that real success isn't loud, it's steady. You gave me the example I needed to become the man I am. So no, you don't get to sit here and regret anything, because without you, I wouldn't have had anything to prove or anyone to prove it to." His hand found mine, squeezed once. "When did you get so wise?" "Must have learned it from someone," I said, squeezing back. We finished our beers as the sun set completely, the sky fading from orange to purple to deep blue. Inside, I could hear Mom directing cleanup, her voice carrying the same authority it always had when it came to managing family gatherings. Soon people would start leaving, heading back to their own lives, their own problems. Tomorrow, I'd fly back to Seattle and dive back into meetings and decisions and all the responsibilities that came with success. But tonight, I was just Marcus Harrison, sitting on a porch with my father, watching him steal glances at the Bentley parked in the driveway like he was afraid it might disappear if he looked away too long. "You going to actually drive it?" I asked. "Or just keep it in the garage like a museum piece?" Dad snorted. "Hell no, I'm driving it. I'm driving it to the grocery store, to church, to my poker games. I'm going to drive that thing everywhere until people are sick of seeing it." "Good," I said, grinning. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear." Cameron stepped out onto the porch, his wife Jessica hovering behind him. "Hey, Marcus, we're heading out. Long drive back home." I stood, extending my hand. "Thanks for coming, Cam." He took it, but instead of the quick shake I expected, he pulled me into an awkward hug. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I've spent years looking down on you, thinking I was the successful one because I had the degree and the job and the house. But you did something I never had the guts to do. You bet on yourself. That takes real courage." I patted his back, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "Thanks, man. That means a lot." Jessica hugged me too, whispering, "He's been really humbled today. It's good for him." She pulled back with a wink, and they headed to their car, Cameron's BMW suddenly looking a lot less impressive parked next to Dad's Bentley. One by one, the rest of the family filtered out, each one making a point to say goodbye to me now, to shake my hand or hug me or tell me they'd always known I'd do something big even though we both knew that was a lie. Vanessa was last, lingering by her car, phone still in hand. "Hey, Marcus," she called. "Can I ask you something?" I walked over, hands in my pockets. "Sure. How did you do it? Really? How did you go from nothing to this?" She gestured at the Bentley, at the house, at everything. I considered the question, looking at this woman who'd mocked me, recorded my failures, treated me like a punchline. I could have been cruel, could have thrown her own words back at her. But that wasn't who I wanted to be. I stopped caring what people thought of me, I said honestly. I stopped letting other people's limitations become my own. And I worked harder than I've ever worked at anything, every single day, even when I wanted to quit. Especially when I wanted to quit. She nodded slowly. "And the family stuff? The jokes, the laughing? I used it," I admitted. "Every single time someone doubted me, it became fuel. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to prove that the only person who gets to decide what I'm capable of is me." "I'm sorry," she said, and for once, she sounded genuine. "For the video, for all of it. I was young and stupid and jealous." "We were all young and stupid," I said. "But we don't have to stay that way." She smiled, a real smile this time, not the practiced influencer one. "Maybe you could give me some advice sometime? About starting a real business, not just the pretend stuff I've been doing?" "Call me," I said. "Seriously. I'm happy to help." After she left, only Mom, Dad, and I remained, standing in the driveway as the last traces of daylight faded. The temperature had dropped, fall starting to assert itself, and I could see my breath in the air. "You staying tonight?" Mom asked hopefully. "Your room's still set up." I thought about the hotel room I'd booked downtown, the king bed and the room service and the privacy. Then I thought about my childhood bedroom, unchanged since the day I left, probably still with the same posters on the walls and the same squeaky box spring. "Yeah, Mom," I said. "I'll stay." Her face lit up, and she kissed my cheek before heading inside, already talking about making me breakfast in the morning, the kind with pancakes and bacon and all the things I'd missed living alone in the city. Dad and I stood there a moment longer, looking at the Bentley, at this physical manifestation of a promise kept, a dream realized, a life transformed. "You know what the best part of this is?" Dad said quietly. "What's that?" "It's not the car, though God knows I love the car. It's that you came back. You could have sent the keys in the mail, could have made this some big public thing, could have rubbed their faces in it. But you drove 17 hours to hand them to me yourself. That's the real gift, son. You being here." I wrapped my arm around his shoulders, feeling how much smaller he seemed than he used to, how time had whittled him down while I wasn't looking. "There was never any other way this was going to happen," I said. "This moment, you and me, this was always how it was supposed to be." We stood there together in the darkness, father and son, in front of a midnight blue Bentley Continental GT, in the driveway of a modest house in suburban Milwaukee, and for that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of my childhood bedroom, casting familiar shadows across walls that still held posters of bands I'd forgotten I loved and athletes whose careers had long since ended. The bed was exactly as uncomfortable as I remembered, the mattress dipping in the same spot it always had, the springs creaking with every movement. But somehow, I'd slept better here than I had in months back in Seattle. I could smell coffee brewing downstairs, bacon sizzling, the sounds and scents of home wrapping around me like a well-worn blanket. My phone showed 6:30 in the morning, which meant Mom had been up for at least an hour already, preparing breakfast like she used to when I was in high school and perpetually late for first period. The board meeting with Ryan wasn't until 9, giving me plenty of time. I grabbed a quick shower in the bathroom that was somehow both smaller and larger than I remembered, where the water pressure was still terrible and the tiles still had that crack in the corner that Dad kept saying he'd fix. Some things, I realized, were comforting in their consistency. When I made it downstairs, Mom was at the stove, humming something off-key, still in her bathrobe. She turned when she heard my footsteps, her face lighting up in a way that made my chest tight. "Morning, sweetheart. I made your favorites. Pancakes, bacon, scrambled eggs. I remember you used to eat half a dozen pancakes before school." Mom, I was 17 and burning about 5,000 calories a day playing basketball. If I ate like that now, I'd be enormous. She waved the spatula dismissively. "You're too skinny. All you tech people, living on coffee and stress. Sit down. Eat." I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd done homework and eaten countless meals, and announced my ridiculous dream of becoming rich. The wood was scarred from years of use, marked with small burns from hot pots and rings from glasses set down without coasters. Dad wandered in a few minutes later, hair sticking up in every direction, wearing the same ratty robe he'd had for 20 years. "Morning," he grunted, making a beeline for the coffee pot. He poured himself a cup, black as always, then noticed me sitting there. A smile spread across his face, slow and genuine. For a second, I thought yesterday was a dream. It wasn't, I assured him. "Good. Because I've been thinking about taking that car out for a proper drive today. Maybe head up to the lake, take the scenic route." Mom set a plate in front of me that could have fed 3 people. "Robert, you've got that doctor's appointment at 11. You can play with your fancy car after." He grumbled something about unnecessary appointments and doctors who didn't know anything, but he was still smiling. I dug into the pancakes, and they tasted exactly like childhood, like Saturday mornings and snow days and all the times when life was simpler even if it was harder. "So," Mom said, settling into her own chair with a cup of tea. "Are you going to tell us what you're really doing out in Seattle? And don't say consulting. That's what people say when they don't want to explain their actual job." I swallowed a bite of bacon, considering how much to share. "I invest in companies, mostly startups. Help them develop their products, scale their operations, connect them with the right people. Some succeed, some fail. The ones that succeed make up for the ones that don't." "And the app thing? The one that made you all this money?" "We sold it 5 years ago. It was called Quick Shift, helped freelancers find temporary work. The company that bought us integrated it into their larger platform. Josh and I stayed on as consultants for 2 years after the acquisition, then went our separate ways. He's in venture capital now. I do a mix of things." Dad studied me over his coffee cup. "You happy doing it?" The question caught me off guard. Not what I earned, not how impressive it sounded, but whether it made me happy. "Yeah," I said after a moment. "Yeah, I am. It's challenging, always different. I get to help people build things that matter. Plus, I can afford to buy my dad a Bentley, so that's a perk." Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you're happy, Marcus. That's all we ever wanted for you. We never cared if you were rich or famous or any of that. We just wanted you to find something that made you want to get up in the morning." "I know, Mom. Though the rich part is a nice bonus," Dad added with a wink. "Especially since you're apparently paying for everything now." "I'm not paying for everything," I protested. "The mortgage that mysteriously got paid off? The medical bills that vanished? That all-expenses-paid Hawaii trip your mother took with Linda last year? Dad, don't dad me. We're not stupid, Marcus. We figured it out. And before you get all defensive about it, let me say this. Thank you. It meant more than you know, being able to stop worrying about money for the first time in our lives. Being able to just breathe. I looked down at my plate, throat tight. You gave me everything. It was the least I could do. We gave you love and support, Mom corrected gently. You gave yourself everything else. The work ethic, the determination, the courage to bet on yourself when everyone else was betting against you. That was all you, sweetheart. We finished breakfast in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who've known each other forever. After helping Mom clean up, despite her protests that I was a guest, I excused myself to take the board meeting in Dad's small home office, a converted spare bedroom that still smelled like his cologne and old paper. Ryan's face appeared on my laptop screen at exactly 9, looking far too awake for 6 in the morning his time. There he is. How's Milwaukee? How'd it go? Perfect, I said, unable to keep the smile off my face. He cried. I cried. It was a whole thing. Good. You needed that. We both know you've been working yourself to death out here, might as well take a win when you can. The meeting itself was routine, discussing quarterly projections for 3 of our portfolio companies, reviewing potential new investments, addressing a minor personnel issue at one of the startups. Ryan and I had fallen into an easy rhythm over the years, finishing each other's thoughts, challenging each other's assumptions, building something bigger than either of us could have alone. One more thing, Ryan said as we were wrapping up. Got a call from Tech Now magazine yesterday. They want to do a profile piece. The usual stuff, rags to riches, startup success, what we're working on now. I grimaced. You know how I feel about press. I do. But Marcus, we're at a point where visibility actually helps us. The companies we invest in benefit from the association. The entrepreneurs we mentor want to know our story. And honestly, you've been hiding long enough. What happened to not caring what people think? Not caring what they think and not inviting their scrutiny are 2 different things. Fair. But think about it. You don't have to decide now. Interview would be in a few weeks if you agree. After we hung up, I sat there for a moment, staring at the blank screen. Ryan had a point. I'd spent so long flying under the radar, keeping my success quiet, that I'd almost forgotten there might be value in being visible. Not for ego, but for impact. How many other kids from neighborhoods like mine were out there right now, working dead-end jobs, convinced they were average, being told their dreams were jokes? Maybe my story could matter to them the way I wished someone's story had mattered to me when I was 23 and terrified. My phone buzzed with a text from Cameron. Hey, you still in town? Want to grab lunch? My treat. I stared at the message, surprised. Cameron and I hadn't done lunch, just the 2 of us, since before I left for Seattle. Our relationship had always been cordial but distant, built on the unspoken understanding that he was the golden child and I was the afterthought. This felt different. I texted back. Sure. Where? That Italian place on Morrison Street? 1 o'clock? See you there. Mom was in the living room when I came downstairs, folding laundry with the TV on low, some morning talk show discussing celebrity gossip. Cameron wants to have lunch, I told her. She looked up, eyebrows raised. Just the 2 of you? Apparently. Huh. She went back to folding one of Dad's shirts with precise, practiced movements. He called here this morning, you know. Asked if you were still around, if you seemed different. Different how? I don't know, honey. He didn't elaborate. But I got the sense that yesterday rattled him a bit. Seeing his little brother show up with a car worth more than his house, proof that you'd done something he didn't think you were capable of. That's got to be hard on the ego. I didn't do it to show him up. I know that. You did it for your father. But Cameron doesn't know that, not really. To him, you've always been the one who needed help, needed guidance, needed him to set the example. Now the tables have turned, and he's trying to figure out where that leaves him. I thought about that as I drove Dad's old pickup truck, the Bentley keys offered and politely declined, across town to the restaurant. Cameron had always been the benchmark, the standard I was measured against and found wanting. He'd gotten straight A's while I scraped by with B's. He'd landed a prestigious engineering job right out of college while I bounced between minimum wage positions. He'd bought a house and gotten married while I was sleeping on Josh's floor and eating ramen for dinner. But somewhere along the way, without either of us noticing, the script had flipped. And now we were meeting for lunch like adults, like equals, like maybe we could be brothers instead of competitors. The restaurant was busy, the lunch crowd already filling most of the tables. I spotted Cameron in a corner booth, scrolling through his phone, and made my way over. He stood when he saw me, extending his hand for a shake that turned into another awkward hug. "Thanks for coming," he said as we sat down. "I wasn't sure you would." "Why wouldn't I?" He shrugged, studying the menu even though I was pretty sure he already knew what he wanted. "Because I've been a dick to you for most of your life?" The bluntness caught me off guard. I'd expected small talk, circling around whatever he really wanted to say, the usual dance of family diplomacy. "You haven't been that bad. Marcus, I laughed when you said you'd be rich." I laughed, and then I made jokes about it for years. Every family gathering, every phone call with Mom, I'd ask about you with this tone, this implication that you were still screwing up, still figuring things out, still not quite measuring up. That was shitty of me. The waiter appeared before I could respond, and we both ordered, buying time to navigate this unfamiliar territory of honest conversation. After he left, Cameron leaned back, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I've been thinking a lot since yesterday," he continued. "About what you did, how you did it, why you did it." And I realized something. I've spent my whole life playing it safe. Following the path that made sense, checking all the right boxes, building a life that looks successful from the outside. And it is successful. I make good money, I have a nice house, a good marriage. I'm not complaining. But I've never taken a real risk. Never bet on myself the way you did. I've always done what was expected, what was sensible. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that made me better than you. Smarter, more responsible, more grown up. He paused, fingers drumming on the table. Then you show up with a $200,000 car for Dad, and I realize you didn't just take risks. You succeeded in ways I never even attempted. And instead of being happy for you, my first reaction was to feel threatened. How messed up is that? It's human, I said quietly. We're conditioned to see success as a zero-sum game. If someone else wins, we must be losing. Yeah, well, I'm trying to unlearn that. Which is why I wanted to talk to you. I want to understand how you did it. Not the business stuff, although I'm curious about that too. But how you found the courage to ignore everyone telling you that you couldn't. Our food arrived, giving me a moment to gather my thoughts. The question was bigger than it seemed, touching on years of self-doubt and determination and the slow, painful process of learning to trust myself. I don't think it was courage, I said finally. At least not at first. It was desperation. I was broke, in debt, working a job I hated, watching everyone around me settle into lives that looked fine but felt suffocating. And I thought, if I'm going to fail, I might as well fail trying to build something I care about rather than succeeding at something I don't. Cameron nodded, listening in a way he never had before, really hearing me instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. Josh and I started working on quick shift in his apartment, I continued. We had no money, no connections, no real plan beyond the idea that there had to be a better way to match workers with short-term jobs. Everyone we pitched to said it wouldn't work, that the market was too crowded, that we didn't have the experience or resources to compete. But you kept going. We kept going. Not because we were brave, but because we didn't know what else to do. And then, slowly, things started working. We got our first 1,000 users, then 10,000, then 100,000. We raised our first real round of funding. We hired our first employees. Each small win made the next risk feel less insane. And the family stuff? Cameron asked. The jokes, the doubt, Mom and Dad struggling while you were barely surviving yourself. How did you deal with that? I thought about the nights I'd lain awake, wondering if everyone was right, if I was delusional for thinking I could build something that mattered. I used it, I admitted. Every time someone laughed or implied I was wasting my time, it became fuel. Not out of spite, exactly, but as proof that I was doing something worth doing. If everyone was comfortable with my choices, I'd probably be making the wrong ones. Cameron was quiet for a moment, pushing pasta around his plate. I think I've been making the wrong choices, he said finally. Or not wrong, exactly, but not mine. I became an engineer because Dad wanted me to have a stable career. I bought the house because that's what you're supposed to do in your 30s. I've built a life that looks right on paper but doesn't feel like mine. So change it. It's not that simple. I've got a mortgage, a wife, responsibilities. I can't just quit my job and start a company. I'm not saying you should. But there's a lot of space between playing it completely safe and betting everything on one big risk. What would you do if you could do anything? He laughed, the sound bitter. I don't even know anymore. I used to have ideas, things I wanted to build or try. But I talked myself out of all of them. Too risky, too impractical, too late. It's not too late, I said firmly. Cameron, you're 35 years old with a stable income, a supportive partner, and skills that are valuable. You're at a better position to take smart risks than I was at 23 with nothing but debt and a dream. Maybe. He met my eyes, something vulnerable in his expression. Would you be willing to talk to me about it? Not now, but sometime. Help me figure out what a smart risk might look like for someone like me? Of course. Anytime. The rest of lunch passed more easily, the tension that had defined our relationship for years finally starting to ease. We talked about his work, my investments, Dad's health, Mom's book club that she'd been trying to get both of us to read the selections for. Normal brother stuff, the kind of conversation I'd always wanted with him but never thought we'd have. As we were leaving, Cameron stopped me in the parking lot. Hey, Marcus. Yeah? I'm proud of you. I should have said that yesterday, should have said it years ago. But I'm saying it now. What you've built, what you've become, it's impressive. And I'm sorry it took a Bentley for me to see it. I pulled him into a real hug this time, not the awkward side squeeze from the day before, but a proper embrace. Thanks, Cam. That means a lot. Driving back to my parents' house, I felt lighter somehow, like a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had lifted. Maybe that was the real gift of coming home. Not just giving Dad his car, but opening the door to relationships that had been closed for too long. Dad was in the garage when I got back, the Bentley parked inside with the door open, him sitting in the driver's seat with the engine off, just taking it all in. I leaned against the doorframe, watching him run his hands over the steering wheel with something close to reverence. You know you can actually drive it, right? I called out. It's not a museum piece. He looked over with a sheepish grin. I know. I'm just savoring it. You spend 40 years dreaming about something, you don't rush the reality. I walked over, leaning against the car's hood. How was the doctor? Fine. Everything's fine. Blood pressure's good, knees healing. He wants me to lose 15 pounds, but what else is new? He climbed out of the car, closed the door with a satisfying thunk. How was lunch with your brother? Good, actually. Really good. He apologized for being a jerk all these years. About time. I've been on him about that for a while now. Told him he was being an ass, that you were doing just fine out there even if we didn't understand exactly what that meant. You never said anything to me. Dad shrugged. Wasn't my place. Brothers have to work out their own stuff. But I'm glad you're talking now. Life's too short to waste on old grudges and stupid competition. We stood there in the garage, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects and the smell of motor oil and possibility. Dad, I said after a moment, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you regret it? Playing it safe, working the factory job, not taking bigger risks. He considered the question, his face thoughtful. That's complicated. Do I wish I'd had more adventure, more excitement, taken some chances that might have paid off? Sure. But the life I built, the family I raised, the fact that I'm standing here with my son who became everything I hoped he would be? I don't regret a second of that. But the Bentley was a symbol, Marcus. It represented a version of myself that I never became, a path I never took. But you know what? I'm standing in my garage with that exact car, given to me by my son who had the courage I didn't. That's better than any version where I bought it myself. Because this isn't about the car. It's about what you had to become to get it. He put his hand on my shoulder, squeezed once. You prove that our family, our bloodline, isn't limited by what I did or didn't do. You broke the pattern. You showed that it's possible. And that matters more than any regret I might have about my own choices. I had to look away, blinking against the sudden burn in my eyes. I love you, Dad. Love you too, son. That evening, Mom insisted on cooking dinner, a proper family meal with pot roast and mashed potatoes and her famous apple pie for dessert. Cameron and Jessica came over, and for a few hours, it was just us, sitting around the kitchen table, talking and laughing without the weight of comparison or competition pressing down on everything. Jessica, who'd been quiet yesterday, seemed more relaxed now, telling stories about her work as a school teacher that had Mom in stitches. Cameron asked genuine questions about my business, taking notes on his phone, his face thoughtful. Dad told terrible jokes that we'd all heard 100 times but laughed at anyway because that's what you did. This, I thought, watching them all together, was what I'd been chasing. Not the money, not the validation, not even the Bentley. Just this. Family that felt like family, acceptance that didn't need to be earned, belonging that was given freely. After dinner, as we were cleaning up, my phone rang. Unknown number, Seattle area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Marcus Harrison? Speaking. This is Jennifer Walsh from Tech Now magazine. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Ryan Chin gave me your number, said you might be interested in doing a profile story. I glanced at the kitchen, at my family still gathered around the table, at the life I'd built both here and in Seattle. Actually, I said, surprising myself, I think I might be. We talked for 20 minutes, Jennifer explaining the angle they wanted to take, the human interest side of success, the journey from average kid in Milwaukee to tech investor with a portfolio worth more than most people saw in 10 lifetimes. She promised it wouldn't be fluff, wouldn't be just another rich guy patting himself on the back. They wanted the real story, the struggles and failures alongside the wins. One question, she said before we hung up. What made you say yes? Ryan said you've turned down every interview request for the last 5 years. I looked through the kitchen doorway at Dad, who was showing Cameron something on his phone, both of them laughing. Because I realized my story isn't just mine, I said. It belongs to everyone who's been told they're average, that their dreams are too big, that they should be realistic. If telling it helps even one person believe in themselves the way I had to learn to believe in me, then it's worth it. That's perfect, Jennifer said, and I could hear her smiling. That's exactly the story we want to tell. After she hung up, I stood in the hallway for a moment, processing what I'd just agreed to. Going public meant exposure, scrutiny, people picking apart every decision I'd made. It meant the end of flying under the radar, of keeping my success quiet. But maybe that was okay. Maybe it was time. I returned to the kitchen to find Mom dishing out pie, huge slices that would put me into a food coma. Everything okay? She asked. You were on the phone for a while. Yeah, everything's fine. Actually, everything's really good. That night, after everyone had left and my parents had gone to bed, I sat on the front porch in the dark, listening to the quiet sounds of the neighborhood. Dogs barking in the distance, a car driving past, wind rustling through trees. The Bentley sat in the driveway, its curves barely visible in the streetlight, proof that impossible things could become real if you worked hard enough and believed long enough. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Hey, I know it's late, but I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. About advice and starting a real business. Are you serious about helping, or were you just being polite? I typed back, completely serious. Send me your ideas and let's set up a call next week. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, thank you. Really? I know I don't deserve your help after how I treated you, but I'm going to prove I'm serious this time. Everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were, I replied. Looking forward to seeing what you come up with. More texts came in over the next hour. Derek asking about investment strategies for his retirement fund. Aunt Linda wondering if I knew anyone hiring in Seattle because her daughter was looking for a fresh start. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembering we were family, suddenly interested in what I was doing. I could have been cynical about it, could have seen it as people only caring now that I had money. But the truth was more complicated than that. People were reaching out because I'd proven something they needed to believe too. That you could start from nothing and build something. That you didn't need connections or privilege or a perfect background. You just needed to refuse to quit, even when quitting made sense. Around midnight, I finally headed inside, creeping quietly through the dark house. But a light was on in the kitchen, and I found Dad there, sitting at the table with a cup of tea, still in his pajamas. Couldn't sleep? I asked. Old man problems, he said. Bladder wakes me up at weird hours. Figured I'd sit here for a bit, enjoy the quiet. He gestured at the chair across from him. Join me? I sat, and he poured me tea from the pot, adding honey the way I'd always liked it, remembering details I'd forgotten he knew. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kitchen clock ticking, the refrigerator humming. I've been thinking, Dad said eventually, about what you asked earlier. About regrets. You don't have to, let me finish. He wrapped his hands around his mug, staring into the steam. The truth is, I do have one regret. Not about the job or the risks I didn't take. But about you. My chest tightened. What do you mean? I regret not protecting you more. From the jokes, from the comparisons, from everyone acting like you weren't good enough just because you weren't Cameron. I let them laugh at you, Marcus. I let them make you feel small. And I told myself it was because I wanted you to develop thick skin, to learn to stand up for yourself. But really, I think I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that if I defended you too loudly, if I said what I really thought, which was that you were special in ways they couldn't see, then I'd be setting you up for even bigger disappointment if things didn't work out. I thought I was being realistic, preparing you for a world that chews up dreamers and spits them out. But what I was really doing was protecting myself from watching you fall. He looked at me then, eyes wet. I should have told you every single day that you could do anything you set your mind to. I should have been your loudest cheerleader instead of your quietest supporter. And I'm sorry for that, son. I'm so damn sorry. I reached across the table, grabbed his hand. Dad, you gave me everything I needed. You taught me to work hard, to keep my word, to measure success by whether I could sleep at night knowing I'd done right by people. That foundation, that's what made everything else possible. But the confidence, the belief in yourself, you had to find that on your own. Maybe that made it stronger. Maybe if you'd just given it to me, I wouldn't have had to build it myself. And building it myself, earning it through failure and persistence, that's what made me someone who could actually pull this off. He squeezed my hand, nodded slowly. When did you get so wise? I smiled. Must have learned it from someone. We finished our tea in silence, and then he stood, wincing as his bad knee protested. All right, I'm heading back to bed. Your mother will worry if she wakes up and I'm not there. She thinks I'm going to have a heart attack every time I get up at night. Dad? I called as he reached the doorway. Yeah? Thank you. For everything. For believing in me even when you were afraid to, for giving me a life I could escape from and a home I wanted to come back to. For being exactly who you are. He smiled, the expression tired but genuine. Right back at you, Marcus. Right back at you. After he left, I sat alone in the kitchen for a while longer, thinking about fathers and sons, about dreams deferred and dreams realized, about the strange and winding path that had led me from that Thanksgiving dinner 10 years ago to this moment. Tomorrow I'd fly back to Seattle, back to the meetings and decisions and constant forward momentum of my life there. But tonight, I was just Marcus Harrison, sitting in his childhood kitchen, drinking tea in the dark, surrounded by memories and love and the quiet knowledge that I'd finally become the man I'd always wanted to be. The man my father had always deserved. 3 months had passed since that birthday party, since I'd handed my father the keys to his dream and watched my family's perception of me shift in real time. Life had returned to its usual rhythm, the Seattle rain replacing Milwaukee's autumn chill, board meetings and investment calls filling my calendar until the days blurred together. But something fundamental had changed, not in my circumstances but in how I carried them. The Tech Now magazine profile had published 2 weeks ago, the cover featuring a photo of me in my office overlooking Puget Sound, the headline reading "The Quiet Revolution, How Marcus Harrison Built an Empire by Ignoring Everyone." Jennifer had done exactly what she'd promised, telling the real story without the usual tech industry hero worship. She'd interviewed people from my past, tracked down former coworkers from the coffee shop, even found my old college roommate who remembered me subsisting on discount pasta and ambition. The response had been overwhelming. My inbox flooded with messages from aspiring entrepreneurs, from people working dead-end jobs who saw themselves in my story, from parents who wanted to know how to support kids with unconventional dreams. Ryan's prediction had been right. Visibility was opening doors I hadn't known existed, creating opportunities to mentor and invest and guide in ways that went beyond just writing checks. But the most unexpected response had come from my own family. Cameron had called the day the magazine hit stands, his voice tight with emotion. He'd read the part where I talked about being called average my whole life, about using that label as motivation instead of limitation. He'd apologized again, more specifically this time, acknowledging moments I'd forgotten but he clearly hadn't. The conversation had lasted 2 hours, ending with him telling me about a business idea he'd been developing, a software solution for small manufacturing companies that he thought could actually work. We'd been talking weekly since then, me offering guidance, him doing the hard work of building something from scratch while keeping his day job. Watching him come alive with purpose and excitement had been its own reward, proof that transformation wasn't reserved for people in their 20s with nothing to lose. Now I stood in my apartment, packing for another trip home. Dad had called 3 days ago with news that his factory was closing, 42 years of employment ending with a severance package and a handshake. His voice had been steady on the phone, philosophical even, but I'd heard the underlying hurt, the sense of an era ending without ceremony or meaning. Mom had been more direct when she'd called an hour later. He's pretending he's fine, but he's not. This place was his identity, Marcus. I don't know what he's going to do with himself now. So I'd cleared my schedule, booked a flight, and now I was heading back to Milwaukee with a plan that had been forming in my mind for months, waiting for the right moment to present itself. Maybe this was it. The flight was smooth, the rental car familiar, the drive to my parents' house automatic at this point. But when I pulled into the driveway, I was surprised to see the Bentley parked prominently in front, gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Dad had been driving it regularly according to Mom's updates, taking it to the grocery store and church and his weekly poker game like he'd promised. But seeing it there, tangible proof that dreams could materialize, still made something in my chest expand. Mom met me at the door before I could knock, pulling me into a hug that lasted longer than usual. "Thank God you're here," she whispered. "He's been in the garage all day, just sitting there, staring at nothing." I found him exactly where she'd said, in his workshop area of the garage, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects, a beer sweating on the workbench beside him. He looked smaller somehow, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. "Hey, Dad." He looked up, and his face transformed, the heaviness lifting just slightly. "Marcus. Your mother tell you to come check on the old man? She might have mentioned you could use some company." I grabbed a folding chair, positioned it across from him. "Want to talk about it?" He took a long pull from his beer, set it down carefully. 42 years, Marcus. 42 years of showing up every day, doing the work, being reliable. And you know how they told us? Mass email. Not even a meeting, just an email explaining that the plant was no longer profitable, that operations would cease in 90 days, that we should contact HR about our severance packages. That's brutal. The younger guys, they'll be fine. They'll find other work, retrain, move if they have to. But me? I'm 65 years old with a body that's held together by stubbornness and ibuprofen. Who's going to hire me now? He laughed, the sound hollow. Guess I'm retired whether I want to be or not. I let the silence sit for a moment, watching him fidget with a wrench on the bench. What if you didn't need anyone to hire you? What do you mean? I mean, what if you started something yourself? Used everything you learned in those 42 years and built something that couldn't be taken away by a corporate email? He frowned. Marcus, I'm not you. I don't know anything about apps or tech or whatever it is you do. I'm a factory guy. That's all I've ever been. Exactly. You're a factory guy with 4 decades of experience in manufacturing, in process improvement, in managing teams and solving problems. Do you have any idea how valuable that knowledge is? To who? The factories are all closing, moving overseas or automating. My skills are obsolete. I leaned forward, an idea crystallizing that had been vague until this moment. What if they're not? What if there's a whole market of small manufacturers, the ones too small to automate completely, struggling because they don't have access to the kind of expertise you have? What if you could consult, help them optimize their operations, train their supervisors, solve the problems you've been solving for decades? He was quiet, but I could see the wheels turning. I wouldn't even know where to start. That's what I'm here for. I know how to start businesses, how to find clients, how to build something from scratch. You know manufacturing inside and out. We combine those two things, we could build something real. You're serious. Completely serious. Look, you've got your severance, you've got Social Security, you don't need this to support yourself. But you need purpose, Dad. You need to wake up with something to do, problems to solve, a reason to get dressed. This could be that. He stood, paced to the garage door, stared out at the street. I spent my whole life playing it safe, Marcus. Following the rules, staying in my lane. And look where it got me. Obsolete at 65. Or, I countered, you spent your whole life building expertise that most people your age don't have, staying employed and relevant through massive industry changes, proving you can adapt. That's not obsolete, Dad. That's resilient. He turned back to me, something flickering in his eyes that might have been hope. You really think this could work? I think if we don't try, you're going to spend the next 20 years wondering what if. And I think you've got too much left to give to spend those years sitting in this garage drinking beer and feeling sorry for yourself. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. When did you get so bossy? Must have learned it from someone. We spent the next 3 hours at the kitchen table, Mom bringing us coffee and sandwiches while we sketched out ideas. What Dad's consulting business could look like, what services he could offer, who his ideal clients would be. He knew the industry inside and out, could rattle off problems that small manufacturers faced and solutions he'd implemented over the years. The more we talked, the more animated he became, the spark returning to his eyes. We could call it Harrison Industrial Solutions, he said at one point, then paused. Or is that too generic? It's perfect, I assured him. Simple, professional, makes it clear what you do. Cameron stopped by that evening, ostensibly to check on Dad, but really, I suspected, because Mom had told him what we were planning. He listened quietly as Dad explained the concept, asked smart questions about market size and competition, and then surprised us both. I might know some potential clients, he said. My company works with a lot of smaller manufacturers. They're always complaining about efficiency problems, training issues, stuff like that. I could make some introductions if you want. Dad's face split into a genuine smile. You do that? Of course. You're my father, and this is a good idea. Plus, Marcus is involved, which means it's probably going to be successful whether the rest of us help or not. The compliment, casual and sincere, meant more than Cameron probably knew. We were becoming brothers again, or maybe for the first time, building something based on mutual respect instead of rivalry. Over the next few weeks, things moved faster than I'd expected. I helped Dad set up an LLC, build a basic website, create marketing materials. Cameron made good on his promise, introducing Dad to 3 potential clients right away. And Dad, once he committed to the idea, threw himself into it with the same dedication he'd given the factory, learning about business development and client relations and all the things that felt foreign but necessary. His first consulting contract came through on a Tuesday morning. A small automotive parts supplier in Indiana needed help optimizing their production line. 2 days of on-site work, enough to pay for the trip and then some, but more importantly, proof that someone valued what he knew. Mom called me that evening, her voice bright. "Marcus, you should see him. He's been on the phone all day, researching this company, making notes, so excited he can barely sit still. It's like he's 30 years old again." "That's great, Mom." "No, you don't understand. This is the man I married, the one who used to come home from work full of stories and ideas, before the years ground him down into someone just going through the motions. You gave that back to him, sweetheart. You gave him back to me." Her words settled in my chest, heavy with meaning. The Bentley had been symbolic, a kept promise made tangible. But this, helping him build something that was his, that couldn't be taken away by corporate restructuring or economic shifts, this felt like the real gift. The magazine profile continued to generate interest, leading to speaking invitations at universities and conferences. I accepted a few, uncomfortable at first with the attention but gradually finding my rhythm. The message was always the same, just delivered different ways. You're not average unless you accept that label. Your dreams aren't impossible unless you stop working toward them. The only person who can define your potential is you. After one such talk at the University of Wisconsin, a young woman approached me, probably 22 or 23, nervous energy radiating off her. "Mr. Harrison, I just wanted to say thank you. I'm a first-generation college student, working 3 jobs to pay tuition, and everyone keeps telling me to be realistic about my expectations after graduation. Your story reminded me that realistic is just another word for limited." We talked for 20 minutes, me offering what advice I could, her soaking it up like water in a drought. As she walked away, I realized this was why the visibility mattered. Not for ego or recognition, but because somewhere out there, people needed to know that the path I'd walked was possible, that you could start with nothing and build something that mattered. 6 months after the birthday party, Dad landed his biggest contract yet. A manufacturing company in Ohio wanted him to spend 3 months on site, completely restructuring their operations. The pay was substantial, the work exactly what he was best at, and the validation that his decades of experience had real market value was priceless. He called me the day he signed the contract, voice thick with emotion. "Marcus, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me, Dad. You did this. You built this business, you impressed these clients, you proved that you've got plenty left to give. I just helped you see what was already there. Still, you believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. That matters, son. That matters more than you know." We talked for a while longer, him sharing details about the contract, me asking questions and offering suggestions. After we hung up, I sat in my office, staring out at the Seattle skyline, thinking about belief and how powerful it could be when directed at someone who needed it. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. 6 months in business and I'm actually profitable. Small, but real. Thank you for not giving up on me when you had every reason to. She'd launched a legitimate consulting business helping small brands with social media strategy, using all the skills she developed as an influencer but applying them to actually help people instead of just posting inspirational quotes. We'd talked weekly since that first conversation, me helping her avoid the mistakes I'd made, her bringing the hustle and determination she'd always had but never properly focused. More texts followed. Derek thanking me for investment advice that had finally gotten his retirement fund on track. Aunt Linda's daughter Rachel, who'd moved to Seattle and landed a job at one of the startups I'd invested in, thriving in ways she never had back home. Even distant cousins I barely knew, reaching out not for handouts but for guidance, for belief, for someone to tell them that wanting more wasn't selfish or delusional. I'd become, somewhat accidentally, the family member people called when they needed to hear that their dreams weren't ridiculous. And I found I didn't mind it. If anything, it gave all the success I'd achieved a purpose beyond personal satisfaction. Dad's consulting business grew steadily over the next year. He hired 2 other retired manufacturing veterans, built a small team, developed a reputation for solving problems efficiently and effectively. He wasn't getting rich, didn't want to, but he was busy and valued and engaged in ways that retirement never would have provided. And every few weeks, he'd take the Bentley out for a long drive, sometimes alone, sometimes with Mom, occasionally calling to ask if I wanted to join him when I was in town. Those drives became sacred time, just us in the road and conversations that went deeper than they ever had before. On one such drive, about 18 months after that birthday party, he asked me something I hadn't expected. "Do you ever regret it? Giving me such an expensive gift when you could have invested that money, helped more people, done something more practical?" I thought about it, watching Wisconsin farmland roll past the window. "Not even once," I said finally. "That car wasn't about the money, Dad. It was about proving something to myself, showing that I could keep a promise I made when I was 12 years old. And it opened doors I didn't know existed. To this conversation, to your business, to actually being your son instead of just the disappointing one. You were never disappointing, Marcus. Maybe not to you and Mom. But to myself? Yeah, I was. For a long time. Until I learned to define success on my own terms instead of everyone else's." He nodded slowly, hands steady on the wheel. "You taught me that. That it's never too late to become who you were supposed to be." We drove in comfortable silence after that, the Bentley humming beneath us, proof that sometimes the most impractical dreams turn out to be the most valuable ones, that keeping your word matters more than being sensible, and that family, real family, is built not on obligation but on showing up for each other in the moments that matter most. The road stretched ahead, endless and full of possibility, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about what came next. Because I'd learned that success wasn't a destination you arrived at but a direction you chose, again and again, every day. And as long as I kept choosing to build things that mattered, to help people who needed it, to stay true to the promises I made to myself and others, then I was exactly where I needed to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.